The Little Ghost Girl by Maggie Hartley is a brilliant read and one of the most unpredictable foster care memoirs I've ever read. I had actually read this one before. It was released originally in 2016. I think I would have read it for the first time a few years later. And rereading it this time, I couldn't really remember that much about it, so I wasn't sure what it would be like. And when we meet the main child that Maggie is fostering, I kind of thought that something was up and it completely just took an opposite direction. And that's a spoiler, so I will, with a spoiler warning, explain what I mean by that. But I think the point there is that it was completely not the read that I was expecting, but in a really good way. It was completely surprising. Ruth is a young girl who stays with Maggie because she's been, well, there are claims of sexual abuse by her father, and it's quite an interesting family dynamic because she lives with her father and her brother, but she also has half brothers and she lives with her stepmother, but she believes her stepmother is her real mother because she can't remember her real mother. So she's got quite an interesting relationship with the other people in her household. Um, because of what's happening, her brother's gone off to a different foster carer. So this is actually just about Ruth and her story. And Ruth is initially not likable. And sometimes with foster care memoirs, when the child is not likable, they can be kind of annoying, but in a way that makes for a really compelling read. But she does go on this journey that makes her experience a wide range of emotions that shows the different sides of her. And I think we get a really good look at Ruth as a person, and I think we get a decent amount of information about her background as well that helps to build a bigger picture. And I don't, as I said, I don't want to say too much about what happens with this because I found it to be very unpredictable, but it does look at the legal side of what happens when there is a claim of sexual abuse on a minor, and that was really fascinating. Very well described, very well written as well. There are some foster care memoirs where the grammar is less than good because I assume the publishers don't put their best editors on it because it's not exactly highbrow literature. But I have to say, this is very, very well written, both in terms of the grammar and the narrative structure. The pacing of it was great. There was not really. Sometimes with foster care memoirs, we can get to an end of a chapter and it's nothing has really happened in that chapter and it's not ending on a cliffhanger or anything, so we're not, kind of desperate to read on. But actually, this one I felt every chapter had a purpose, every chapter helped the narrative to move forward. And of course, I say narrative, it is based on truth, but with foster care memoirs, the identities of the children and the details of the cases are heavily amended to hide the identities, to save or to protect the identities of those involved. It's never quite clear exactly how much is fabricated, but generally I always feel like these are believable, and this is absolutely the case here. Really thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're looking for a story that's completely unpredictable, that has a really great character progression, again, I say character because Ruth is based on a real person. Not sure how much of it is based on truth and how much is created for this, but either way, it felt believable and I absolutely enjoyed it for all of the right reasons. So, spoilers, I will discuss not in too much detail, but these are spoiler things for things that happened that I wasn't expecting. So, if you haven't read it, I strongly advise you to stop listening to me now. So, the first thing that I was really surprised with is the fact that Ruth was sexually abused. I've read, I think, over 60 foster carer memoirs now, and there are a couple where a child of maybe Ruth's age, she's 11, 12, maybe slightly older, where they've claimed sexual abuse or physical abuse because either they want the attention or they want to get that person in trouble. And because they're quite confident about it and quite cocky with it, it's usually a strong sign that actually it hasn't happened. And that comes out in those stories. Because Ruth was so cocky and confident, obviously it's just a wall that she's putting up in front of her. I was so certain that this hasn't happened. And this was one of those cases where the child or the preteen had made this up for whatever reason. And that's not to say that I didn't believe Ruth, but to begin with, because of the way it was presented, because of the way Ruth presented herself, I didn't believe her. And I guess that would be a problem for Ruth because as I said, in most cases, with foster care memoirs at least, when a child has that kind of attitude and they don't appear to be scarred by it mentally. With Ruth, we realize this is definitely the case, and as she starts to have some questionable and problematic behaviors, it's very clear that actually something has happened. But to begin with, it's quite atypical for a child to have that attitude. So I was completely taken by surprise with the direction it took. The other thing that I wasn't expecting was when they found her birth mother, and I was not expecting that at all. And I'm not 100% sure how I feel about the way that that moved. In the book, it says she didn't abandon her children because she left them with their father. That may be the case, but her mother knew that her father wasn't a nice person. He was controlling and manipulative. So why would you abandon your children with a person like that? And yeah, I understand her getting out of that situation, but why would you leave your children in that situation? Why wouldn't you go to social services and be like, look, I've had to escape this house. It's horrible, but my children are in there. Please help. So I actually don't think that they can say she didn't abandon her children because, I mean, yeah, legally on paper, she left them with their father, but also she left them with somebody who was controlling and manipulative, and that's not a good thing. So I don't actually think it was right for social services to just be like, oh yeah, well, you left them with their father, so it's fine. Let's just assess you and you can move back together if things go well. Because that's horrible. How can you be a loving parent if you leave your children with somebody you had to escape? So I didn't agree with that. I'm hoping that that's not how it actually played out in the true story, because I feel like if a mother or father leaves their children with an adult they've had to escape because of how they're treating them, you're not a good parent. At the end of the day, if you're a parent, you should look after your children before yourself. If she couldn't take them with her, as she said, she didn't, he wouldn't let her take them. That's fair enough. You get out of that situation, you get yourself safe so that you are in a position to help your children, not abandon them with a monster. So I didn't like her very much. And I don't think social services should have been like, yeah, it's fine, you left them with their father. We'll forget the fact that you had to escape their father and you abandoned your children with somebody you knew was potentially dangerous. You're a good parent. Let's move forward with this. No, doesn't make any sense to me. But it still took me by surprise that she even came back into the picture. So I don't like her, but I did like what it brought to the story because it meant that was another thing that was completely unpredictable. The Little Ghost Girl is a brilliant read. I'm really pleased that, I read it 4 or 5 years ago for the first time. I'm pleased I couldn't remember most of the details because it was really great to rediscover it. Obviously, by this point, I have ruined it if you haven't read it yet, but either way, I'm really pleased with it. Really enjoyed reading it for the right reasons and found it to be very eye opening as well.